Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Soibatian, and today I'm going to be presenting my research on how wealth and socioeconomic status influences an individual and their life. So I'm going to start off with my thesis, which is when an individual at or below the poverty line has reached a threshold above that for a comfortable lifestyle where their physical, psychological, and financial needs are all met. And basically, when this happens, an increase in wealth starts becoming associated with negative consequences. So as wealth increases, things like compassion, empathy, and the individual's individual psychological well-being also tends to decrease with it. So the Monopoly study is a really interesting study conducted by Paul Piff and his researchers at UC Berkeley, and there's also a TED Talk on it, which is really awesome. And basically what Paul Piff and his researchers did was they got a group of undergraduate students at UC Berkeley play a game of Monopoly. But the catch was that this game of Monopoly was rigged in favor of one student. The researchers gave that one participant a larger sum of Monopoly money before the game began. So he was already at an unfair advantage to his other classmates. And he obviously won the game, and the results were really astounding. That advantaged student with a larger sum of money began to behave differently during the game. He would trash talk other players, he would loudly slam his game piece as he moves around the Monopoly board. And afterwards, when the researchers asked him, why do you think you won the game? He focused on things that he himself did, with no mention of the monetary advantage he had been given at the beginning of the game. He focused on things like his strategy or even things like luck. So going back to this idea of the economic threshold, we talked a little bit about what happens above this point, but let's go down a bit. And below this point, money is not just beneficial to someone, it's necessary for nearly every aspect of oneself. Money gives people the freedom to achieve those aspects, like we talked about, the physical, the psychological, the financial means. It gives them the power and the ability to do those things. But without money, individuals become stuck attempting to earn money, enough money to survive, therefore never having the time or the financial means to fulfill their personal goals and ambitions. And this idea is the foundation of what we like to call the rat race. I'm sure everyone's probably heard that. This is the stem of that idea. So before I talk about money and addiction, I would just like to preface this by saying that money in itself cannot cause addiction. The paper money, the credit cards, none of it is actually an addictive thing like we see in things like nicotine and alcohol. However, it can have similar addictive qualities in terms of the chase and the dopamine rush we get. That's why shopaholics are a thing, but those are more of a compulsive disorder rather than an actual addiction like we see with nicotine and alcohol. So the rich actually outdrink the poor by more than 27%, which can happen from a variety of reasons. The wealthy have more disposable income. They need ways to cope with obstacles surrounding a certain lifestyle, things like an increased work responsibility. They might be the CEO of their own company, but also these things are also much easier to access for the wealthy crowd. But if we flip it and we go back to people who are in poverty or below that comfortable threshold, things like job loss, illness, small changes in financial state can impact those in those lower socioeconomic levels in a very different way than it does to the wealthy, because the wealthy usually have a kind of safety net to fall back on, whether as if the people in lower socioeconomic statuses do not. So the philosophy of money, this is an idea by S.P. Altman. His article journal Philosophy of Money and the American Journal of Sociology, he states that money becomes less and less inadequate to personal values. And what this means is that the more money someone accumulates, the more likely they are to push their morals to the back burner in attempts to gain more of it. And remember, we talked about the rat race. This is kind of the higher spectrum of it, is when you have wealth and yet you continuously try to accumulate more. And when this happens, it starts to suggest a disconnect between a wealthy individual's perception and empathy towards those who aren't in a similar socioeconomic bracket. And basically all this boils down to is wealthy become indifferent to the plights of the common working class, people who aren't in those same tax brackets, who aren't in those same socioeconomic brackets. So that is my presentation. I would like to thank everybody for coming, and I hope everybody has a good rest of their day. Thank you for watching.